Hello, and welcome. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight. This is your moment to let the world soften around you, to feel the quiet settle in like moonlight spilling across an empty meadow. Tonight, we'll step into the hushed stillness of an October night, where the air is crisp with possibility and the stars hum with stories waiting to be told. You'll walk alongside Jane, yes, that Jane, as she wanders through moonlit gardens and dew-kissed fields, listening for voices just beyond the edge of silence. This is a place where words linger in the air like fireflies, where pride and prejudice dance in the shadows, and where love, like the best stories, unfolds in its own perfect time. So let your breath slow, your thoughts grow light. Feel the weight of the day lift as you sink into the quiet. And when you're ready, we'll begin just as Jane did, beneath a sky full of whispers. The October night wrapped around the countryside like a silken shawl, and Jane stepped from the warmth of the Steventon rectory into the silver-touched darkness. The moon hung full and luminous above the Hampshire hills, casting everything in its gentle, dreaming light. She had been restless all evening, her mind turning over fragments of conversation, snippets of wit, the delicate dance of words that lovers might exchange if they were brave enough, foolish enough, proud enough to speak their hearts. Her quill had scratched endlessly across paper, but the words felt trapped, waiting for something to set them free. The garden path beckoned, worn smooth by years of evening wanderings. Jane pulled her woolen cloak closer and stepped onto the familiar stones, her feet finding their way without thought through the maze of autumn roses and late-blooming lavender. The scent rose around her like incense, mingling with the crisp sweetness of apple orchards and the distant earthiness of turned fields. Overhead, the stars scattered themselves across the indigo canvas of night, each one a tiny flame of possibility. Jane had always found her clearest thoughts beneath this vast ceiling of sky, where the smallness of human concerns seemed both humbling and strangely liberating. Here, in the hushed cathedral of darkness, her characters could breathe, could speak with voices she had not yet heard in the confines of her writing room. The path curved past the old sundial, its brass face catching moonbeams, and led her toward the meadow that stretched beyond the garden walls. This was her sanctuary, this gentle slope that rolled down toward the woods, where the night air moved freely and carried with it the whispered conversations of leaves and the distant murmur of a stream. She paused at the wooden gate, her hand resting on the smooth latch worn by countless openings, and felt the familiar quickening in her chest. Tonight felt different somehow, charged with a creative electricity that made her fingertips tingle. The characters she had been wrestling with all evening seemed to stir in her mind, as if the moonlight itself might coax them into clearer focus. Elizabeth and Darcy. Their names had been circling in her thoughts for days. Two proud souls locked in a dance of misunderstanding and attraction that she could not quite choreograph. She could see them clearly when she closed her eyes, Elizabeth with her quick wit and dancing intelligence, Darcy with his severe dignity masking something tender and vulnerable beneath, but their voices still eluded her, the precise cadence of their banter, the moment when hostility might transform into recognition, then into something deeper. The gate opened with a soft creak, and Jane stepped into the meadow. The grass was heavy with dew, darkening the hem of her dress as she walked slowly across the gentle slope. She found her favorite spot near a cluster of ancient oak trees, their massive trunks silver-touched by moonlight, their branches creating a natural alcove where she could sit and think in perfect solitude. The countryside stretched endlessly around her, bathed in that magical blue-white glow that transformed even the most familiar landscape into something from a fairy tale. Rolling hills curved away into misty distance, while closer by, hedgerows marked the boundaries of sleeping fields with precise dark lines. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Jane settled onto a fallen log that nature had provided like a perfectly placed seat, and felt the night air fill her lungs with its clean, cold sweetness. A barn owl called from somewhere in the distance, its voice floating across the meadow like a ghost of sound. The stream she could not see murmured its endless conversation with the stones, and from the village came the faint chiming of a church bell marking the late hour. But these sounds did not disturb the deeper silence that surrounded her, that pregnant, creative silence where stories were born. Jane closed her eyes and let her mind drift, feeling her way toward the voices that had been hovering just beyond her reach all evening. I could more easily forgive his vanity had he not wounded mine, she whispered to the night air, and suddenly there was Elizabeth's voice, clear as crystal, sharp as winter stars. The words seemed to hang in the darkness, taking shape and substance, and Jane felt a thrill of recognition. There. That was the tone she had been searching for, that perfect balance of hurt and wit, vulnerability masked by intelligence. She rose and began to walk slowly through the meadow, her footsteps muffled by the soft grass. Movement often helped her think, the gentle rhythm of walking seeming to unlock the rhythm of dialogue, the natural flow of speech between characters who were beginning to feel as real as the night air around her. In vain have I struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. The words came as if spoken by the night itself, and Jane stopped walking, her heart quickening. That was Darcy's voice, not the cold, distant tone she had first imagined, but something raw and desperate beneath its careful control. She could almost see him standing in some moonlit room, finally abandoning his pride long enough to speak the truth of his heart. The meadow around her seemed suddenly populated with invisible presences, Elizabeth's quick footsteps on polished floors, Darcy's measured pace across drawing rooms, where his presence commanded attention but not understanding. Jane could almost hear the whisper of silk gowns, the gentle crackling of fires in elegant hearths, the soft clink of teacups in parlors where every word carried weight and meaning. She resumed walking, following no particular path, but letting her feet carry her where they would. The meadow was large enough that she could wander for an hour and never reach its boundaries, could lose herself entirely in the luxury of uninterrupted thought. The dew soaked through her thin slippers, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, inhabiting drawing rooms and ballrooms where her characters moved through their intricate dance of attraction and resistance. "What do you think of books?" Elizabeth might ask, her eyes sparkling with mischief, and Jane could hear the layers beneath the simple question. The testing, the probing, the desire to understand the man behind the forbidding exterior. They serve to pass the time agreeably when one has nothing better to do, Darcy might reply, but Jane could hear the lie in it, could sense the man who filled his vast library with treasured volumes, who found in books the companionship that his pride would not allow him to seek in society. The conversation unfolded in her mind as she walked, each exchange revealing new facets of these characters who seemed to have lives entirely independent of her imagination. She paused beside a stone wall that marked some long-forgotten boundary, its rough surface cool beneath her palm, and listened to the night sounds that surrounded her, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through wheat fields, the gentle splash of water over stones. These were the sounds of rural England, of the world she knew and loved. But in her mind they became the backdrop for more elegant settings, the rustle of silk against mahogany, the soft conversation of candlelight and shadow, the careful music of social intercourse where every glance carried meaning. A shooting star blazed across the sky, its brief fire drawing Jane's gaze upward. She made no wish. She had learned that the best gifts came not from asking, but from waiting, from remaining open to the possibilities that the universe might offer. Instead, she simply watched until the star's light faded, leaving behind only the vast, patient presence of the moon. "You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." The words came so clearly that Jane almost looked around, expecting to see Darcy himself standing in the meadow. But there was only moonlight and shadow, only the gentle mystery of night. She smiled, recognizing that moment when imagination achieves perfect clarity, when fictional voices become as real as any she might hear in waking life. The scene played out in her mind with startling vividness. A parlor at Hunsford, rain drumming against windows, Elizabeth's shocked silence meeting Darcy's desperate honesty. Jane could see every detail, the way the firelight would catch the emotion in his eyes, the tremor in his carefully controlled voice, the precise moment when months of suppressed feeling would finally break through the barriers of pride and propriety. She walked on, deeper into the meadow, following a faint track that might have been made by deer or might have existed only in her imagination. The night air was growing cooler, but Jane felt warmed by the creative fire that burned within her. This was why she loved these midnight wanderings, these hours when the day's obligations fell away and left her free to inhabit the worlds she was creating. "You are mistaken, Mr. Darcy." Elizabeth's voice came to her again, clear and strong. "I have never desired your good opinion, and you have certainly bestowed it most unwillingly. There was the steel beneath the silk, the strength that would make Elizabeth worthy of a man like Darcy, worthy of the transformation their love would demand from both of them. Jane found herself at the edge of the woods now, where ancient trees created a natural boundary between the open meadow and the deeper mysteries of forest. She did not venture into the darkness between the trees, but she stood for a moment listening to the different sounds that emerged from the woodland, the dry rustle of leaves, the soft call of a night bird, the faint crack of a twig under the foot of some unseen creature following its own nocturnal path. Here, at the border between open space and hidden depths, she felt herself at the edge of her own story, sensing depths and complexities that would take months to explore. Elizabeth and Darcy were only the beginning. There would be Jane Bennet with her gentle optimism, and Bingley with his open heart. There would be Wickham with his charming duplicity, and Lydia with her thoughtless passion. A whole world of characters waited to be born, each with their own voice, their own desires, their own part to play in the intricate symphony of human feeling. The church bell chimed again from the village, marking another hour's passage. Jane realized she had been walking for longer than she had intended, but she felt no urge to return to the house. The story was flowing now, the voices coming clear and strong, and she was reluctant to break the spell that moonlight had woven around her thoughts. She turned and began walking back across the meadow, but slowly, savoring each step. The dew had grown heavier, and her skirts were thoroughly dampened, but the discomfort seemed a small price for this clarity of vision. Above her, the moon had moved perceptibly across the sky, its light now falling at a different angle, transforming the familiar landscape once again. In such cases as this, it is, I believe, the established mode to express a sense of obligation, she heard Elizabeth say, and there was the wit that would win Darcy's heart, as surely as her beauty had first captured his attention. Jane smiled, recognizing the moment when hatred would begin its slow transformation into understanding, when pride would meet its match in prejudice, and both would be conquered by something larger than either. As she walked, more fragments came to her, conversations between sisters whispered in bedrooms, arguments in drawing rooms, where politeness barely concealed deeper passions, moments of revelation in gardens and parlors, where characters would finally see themselves and each other clearly. The whole novel seemed to exist already, complete and perfect, waiting only for her to discover it, page by page, word by careful word. Near the center of the meadow, she paused again and looked back toward the woods, then ahead to where the rectory's windows glowed like warm amber squares in the distance. She felt suspended between these two worlds, the wild, creative darkness behind her and the civilized comfort ahead, and realized that this suspension was exactly where she needed to be. Her best work came from this balance between refinement and wildness, between the mannered world of drawing rooms and the untamed landscape of human passion. We neither of us performed to strangers, she heard Darcy say, and there was the key to his character, the shyness masquerading as pride, the deep feeling hidden behind a cold exterior. Jane laughed softly, delighted by the revelation. How many people would mistake shyness for arrogance? How many would see pride where there was actually uncertainty? The questions her novel would explore seemed suddenly clear. How much of what we call love is really vanity? How often does pride prevent us from seeing truth? When does prejudice become a kind of blindness? And how difficult is it to learn to see clearly? These were not simple questions, and they would require all her skill to explore honestly. A bat flickered overhead, its flight so quick and erratic that Jane could barely follow its path through the darkness. She thought of the way truth often moved just like that, darting and unpredictable, visible only in brief glimpses before disappearing again into the safety of shadows. Her characters would have to learn to recognize truth in just such brief moments, would have to be quick enough to catch it when it appeared. The night air was beginning to carry a hint of morning, though dawn was still hours away. Jane knew she should return to the house soon, should try to capture on paper some of the conversations she had heard so clearly in the meadow. But she was reluctant to leave this magical space where stories came to life so effortlessly. She walked on toward the rectory, but slowly, stopping frequently to look back at the meadow or up at the moon. Each pause brought new insights, new fragments of dialogue, new understanding of the complex emotional mathematics that would drive her story. This was the gift the night had given her, not just plot or character, but a deep understanding of the forces that would move her people through their intricate dance of attraction and resistance. As she reached the garden gate, Jane paused for one final look back across the meadow. The moon seemed lower now, its light softer and more golden, touching the landscape with a gentleness that made her heart ache with unexpected tenderness. Tomorrow she would return to her desk, would begin the patient work of translating moonlight inspiration into daylight prose. But she would carry this night with her, this perfect clarity of vision, this moment when all the voices spoke clearly and the path ahead seemed illuminated as brightly as the meadow in moonlight. She pushed open the gate and stepped back into the garden, her feet finding the familiar path automatically. The house waited ahead, warm and welcoming, but Jane felt no sadness at leaving the wild darkness behind. She had found what she came looking for, had heard the voices she needed to hear. Elizabeth and Darcy would live now, would love and struggle, and find their way to understanding, and their story would unfold as inevitably as dawn follows darkness, as surely as the moon returns each night, to light the way for dreamers and storytellers wandering in search of truth. The last thing she heard as she reached the door was Elizabeth's laughter, bright and confident, echoing across the years that stretched ahead, years in which that laughter would become as familiar to readers as their own heartbeat, as enduring as moonlight on English meadows, as true as love itself.